All right, I think we have everybody here. People may trickle in, but it is just 1 minute past the hour. So let's get started. Hi, everybody. I'm Dawn Bauman, CAI Senior Vice President of Government and Public Affairs. I thank you for coming today to learn about some of the resources we have to share with each other. This is an opportunity just for our Legislative Action Committee leadership, chairs, vice chairs, secretary, treasurers, to hear about what's some of the resources we have to offer, share some best practices, talk about our LAC operational guidelines, etc. I'm going to turn it over to Peter Christian, who is chair of CAI's Government and Public Affairs Committee and general manager at Hilton Head Plantation, as well as past chair or current chair, I never know, of his South Carolina Legislative Action Committee, very involved, and past president of the Institute. Peter, take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Dawn. And first of all, thank all of you for being on the call and for all the hard work you and your fellow LAC delegates do on behalf of all the folks who live in community associations. Just a small correction, Dawn. I'm the secretary presently of the South Carolina LAC. I was the chair or co-chair of the Maryland LAC many years ago. And as Dawn indicated, I'm presently have the privilege of being the chair of the Government and Public Affairs Committee for CAI. And just a little bit about how this weaves together. The LACs are governed by the LAC guidelines, but they are also governed by public policies that, I don't want to say they start in the Government and Public Affairs Committee, they come from several sectors, even from LACs who bubble them up, but ultimately it's a recommendation from the Government and Public Affairs Committee to the Board of Trustees that public policies are adopted. And those public policies are the guiding principles that we give to the LACs and ask them to use as their guidance for legislative issues across the United States. There comes a time when a LAC may need to depart from those public policies, and there is a system in place which has been used where if you need to depart from that, you can make your case to the Government and Public Affairs Committee, and you can be offered a dispensation under particular circumstances to deviate from those public policies. Dawn and the other members of the team are going to talk to you about many different tools, but the most important tool that we possess is grassroots. We have come so far in the past 30 years where we would have to beg to get in front of a delegate or an elected official to plead our case regarding legislation that involves a community association. Now we are sought after by elected officials and we're asked before they develop legislation. Not always, but oftentimes that is the case. And developing those relationships with your elected officials is so important. We can make them look very good. We can work with them, and sometimes they'll offer up things despite us, but in the last 30 years, they have really come to appreciate what we do because we do bring an honest perspective and a lot of expertise to the table. We're going to cue up a video in a little bit, but before we do that, I wanted to mention that Dawn is going to talk about the level of sophistication many of the LACs have come to, looking at organizing your LAC and your delegates into a couple of different sectors. And I'm just going to mention a couple, and Dawn is going to go into this in a little bit more depth. You know, consider putting a fundraising committee or someone in charge of fundraising. Consider putting someone in charge of legislative issues purely, and communications. And then, of course, you have the folks on this call who are in leadership positions. We have not done this in a year or two, but we have also lobbied on the federal level where we have made trips to the state capitol. And unfortunately, due to COVID, we haven't done that in a few years, but that has been extremely successful. And I've gone on several occasions. And if you have the opportunity, if we tee that opportunity up again, to make a trip to Washington, it is extremely beneficial. Those nationally elected officials are very anxious to meet with you, and our national folks work very, very hard to set up all of those meetings for you. So all you have to do is show up, and they give you a package of information along with all of the latest issues. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Dawn, and we're going to probably look at a short video, and then we're going to talk about nitty-gritty things. Dawn, back to you.
Great, thank you.
For sound public policy for people living and working in community associations is everyone's business. Advocacy is your business. CAI lobbies on behalf of our members in every state and the federal government. We need you to be successful. CAI's legislative action committees advocate on nearly 2,000 pieces of legislation each year. Help protect your interests and your property values. Your community matters. Become an advocate today.
As Peter mentioned, one of the initiatives that we are continuing to pursue is engaging our membership, engaging advocates to help our state legislative action committees do their jobs even better by having that backing of constituent support. And actually, Peter, we did have an opportunity last year to have a lot of meetings with members of Congress, virtual meetings. If you may recall, we brought together states and had meetings with congressional delegations at the federal level. And during COVID, we had several legislative action committees, I believe, and chime in if I'm missing any, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Florida, Texas, California, all held virtual advocacy days and really had some tremendous engagement with constituents and legislators. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the government affairs structure within CAI. So you know where the legislative action committees fit in. This was our, that last one was our advocacy summit in maybe 2019, May of 2019, I think, or May of 2018. We will be planning one for October of 2022, so mark your calendars. Okay, so we have 36 state legislative action committees. Our entire advocacy effort includes our 36 state legislative action committees, our federal legislative action committees, the national government and public affairs teams, of course, our chapters, which is a critical component that we can't forget, the government and public affairs committee, which oversees all of the policy as well as priorities for the organization, and all of the lobbyists. We have a federal lobbyist. I'm a registered federal lobbyist, as well as Scott Kennedy. And we have probably about 20, I want to say about 25 lobbyists in different states. So that group of lobbyists is also a core function of our government and public affairs team. With our legislative action committees, I'm going to talk a little bit about how some of the legislative action committees have been structured and operating. So, as you know, our legislative action committees are governed by our legislative action, our operational guidelines, our LAC operational guidelines. We just posted a link to the operational guidelines. That goes over the role and responsibility, how delegates are appointed and elected, the authority of the Legislative Action Committee, the finances, the communication responsibilities, etc. It's really important to that your Legislative Action Committee knows that you're functioning within those operational guidelines. Also, of course, partners, the Legislative Action Committees, it's critical that they partner with our team at the national office, as well as the chapters in your state, whether it's one chapter or multiple chapters. The work that we do, that you do as legislative action committees, if we don't communicate it with our chapters, and if we don't keep in touch with our chapters, letting them know what the LACs are doing, we're really missing an opportunity to share the successes and to share and to engage and to build consensus and hear from members about what they're seeing and what they're hearing. And then, of course, tapping into that grassroots, that constituent advocacy efforts. As Peter mentioned, we're guided by public policies and priorities. We're in the process right now of identifying the priorities for 2022. We'll talk about them in a little bit. My guess is you probably can already guess what those priorities are. We also want to hear from all of you and what you're hearing in your states that might inform what happens in other states. Finally, the overarching goal of the legislative action committees is to fulfill a promise to CAI members that we will advocate on behalf of the community association housing model to the best that we can. Oftentimes, we'll have conversations with legislative action committees about a specific bill. Let's just say electric vehicle charging stations, for example. And let's say we have a member who provides electric vehicle charging stations. And they come to us and say, hey, we would like you, CAI, to advocate on our behalf to make sure that all associations must put in electric vehicle charging stations. Well, even though that is a member of CAI, we're not going to go beyond the scope of advocating for the best interest of the community association housing model, even though some of our member categories might have a specific interest. We also had this example when it comes to maybe landscaping or lead pipes, etc. We have to look at the broad perspective of the community association housing model. And when we look at our public policies, when the Government Public Affairs Committee looks at our public policies, that's the scope in which we look at our policies. And at the end of the day, what happens is the policies are good for everybody else in our membership. And that gives us the ability to stay focused on our core priorities of the community association housing model. Again, I mentioned this early on. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to just open up your mic, ask a question, raise your hand, put something in the chat. Happy to answer any questions you might have. You know, when I first started in this role, we weren't monitoring as much legislation as we monitor today. We weren't acting on as much legislation. We weren't having as much. We weren't even being as proactive because typically we don't want to have new laws impacting community associations. We want community associations to be able to self-govern. So to have maybe a uniform framework, a legal framework, and not mess with that very much, just allow community associations to work within that framework and develop policies for themselves. But we've had to, with COVID, with now the condominium safety initiatives, we've had to take steps to be more proactive in some cases and in some states, which has created and we have a lot of people living in associations. California, Texas, Florida, certainly California and Florida, nearly 50% of the population lives in a community association. Other states now, it's upwards of 26, 27% of the population living in a community association, which means there's a lot of people who want to talk about community associations and they go to their legislators and they want to talk about community associations. And then bills are introduced that we then have to navigate and advocate on behalf of our members. So we're seeing more and more legislation. So when it used to be 1 or 2 or maybe 3 or 4 people could handle the work on the Legislative Action Committee. They would make connection with legislators, help the legislators amend the bill or oppose a bill, whatever it happens to be, and move on their merry way. Well, now we have a lot going on, and we have a lot that we need to communicate with our members. We have the need for more lobbyists, for more public relations, for more opportunity to connect with legislators. So we also have the opportunity, we have more members than ever before. So previously, just 10 years ago, we had something like 16,000 members. We have 43,000 members. Many of them want to be engaged in these exciting opportunities and these exciting efforts. So what I'm sharing with you on this slide is some ideas for legislative action committees to incorporate to give volunteers an opportunity to serve in different levels, not just the policy level of looking at the bills and amending the bills and evaluating and analyzing the legislation, but helping with that fundraising, helping with that communication, and helping with the grassroots engagement. We've now added to the LAC operational guidelines an appendix document that you will see after this call, and it includes an idea of what a policy committee might look like, what a fundraising committee might look like. We can help support those activities as well. But I would like to urge you to look at adding some of these positions to your legislative action committees. Now, how some legislative action committees are already doing this, and how it works is the chair of the committee is a member of the LAC, but committee members don't have to be delegates of the legislative action committee. So it also gives an opportunity to bring people in to the legislative action committee setting and get them trained for succession for when we have new legislative action committee members. All right, Phoebe, it's all you. Before I introduce Phoebe, I'd like to introduce my other colleagues who are on the line as well. Lula Fakadu, most of you know her, you'll hear from her a lot. She handles a lot with the organization, but with you guys directly, she handles a lot of the scheduling of our events like this, as well as the LAC delegate appointments. Also, Hannah Engber is new to our team. Welcome to Hannah. Hannah's working on our calls to action, our grassroots engagement. So you'll be working a lot with her, especially as the sessions get going to get the word out to members. Phoebe Nessick, who is my right-hand person and a superstar. She's been on the team for a while now, and she's going to talk about some of the important issues on what the LACs can be doing from a month-to-month basis. Go ahead, Phoebe.
Thanks so much, Dawn. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. It's so good to have you here and to see so many familiar faces again. While we had everyone on the call today, we just wanted to provide a high-level holistic timeline of what our legislative action committees should be considering throughout the year as their legislative sessions are starting, going on, and adjourning. We've broken the timeline down into three main categories: your pre-session goals, your mid-during session goals, and then post-session goals. These timelines vary between states based on the calendar year that your general assemblies are in session, but these are just ideas you should be thinking of throughout the whole calendar year and goals you should be aiming to reach while you work with your legislatures and with your CAI membership and chapters. When after sessions adjourn, there's usually a downtime. We start seeing our legislative action committees probably around August start considering pre-session goals based on when their legislative session ended. If your session goes 6 months a year, those legislative action committees typically begin looking at these pre-session goals for the next year, October, November. So right about this time, actually. In these weeks and months leading up to your next legislative session, your legislative action committees should be meeting with each other a few times to discuss new legislative initiatives you may want to consider. Also reviewing any legislation that has passed in the most recent years that might need a legislative fix to better support our industry as a whole from the legislature. You should also be reviewing any legislators who really stood out in past sessions and were advocates for the community association housing model. Touch base with them and see if they have any ideas coming down the pipeline for the next session as well. And again, a LAC planning session, at least try to meet once before your legislative sessions begin to connect and have these discussions before bills begin to be introduced. And that being said, during your legislative sessions, which many of you do and have these schedules in place, tracking relevant legislation, you have our legislative tracking resources through our office. I know some of your lobbyists also handle these legislative tracking day-to-day pieces for you as well. Advocating for or against legislation that is either beneficial to the community association housing model or harmful as well. You do this through testifying at hearings, submitting calls to actions, having those meetings with legislators throughout the legislative session, and getting the LAC's face in front of the relevant people on these issues during the calendar session. Again, regularly communicating your work with your chapters, the CEDs, the boards. Many of these individuals are on your LACs, so these organic communications do happen. But you can do this through email blasts. I know many chapters do publish articles throughout the year on efforts their legislative action committees are doing. It's really great best practice and habit to get into to make sure these communications are happening throughout the weeks and months of your sessions. Finally, grassroots take action campaigns. Many of our LACs have been utilizing these email systems we offer through our office or their own grassroots campaigns. You have so many more advocates than just the LACs in each of your states. We have our full CAI membership throughout each state who can connect directly with their representatives and senators, and it's really critical to engage them throughout sessions on certain issues. Finally, once your legislative session adjourns for the year, your LAC should be having a strategic planning post-session, looking at what happened, putting together communications and session reports to your membership in your state, letting them know all of the hard work you did during that legislative sessions, wins, losses, and where you might need help in the future too. This communication, again, is critical to continuing to grow our grassroots systems and our advocate base throughout the nation. And then again, having the conversations about thanking legislators who were advocates and champions for the community association housing model during session. Some LACs over the years have established awards for these individuals that they provide to them at certain events. This is certainly something we encourage all LACs to consider if there was that champion in the General Assembly in your state that you want to keep engaged in future issues as well. Aside from the breakdown of the 3 periods a year, there's also individual initiatives that can be going on all year round, no matter what phase of session your General Assembly is in. A huge focus on fundraising is done by a number of our legislative action committees, promoting the LAC's efforts all year. If you have a $1 a door campaign in your state, whenever you can get those documents or promotions into an email or at an event, be sure to do so. It's another good best habit for our LACs to be pushing out these initiatives. Finally, your end of session reports all include a pitch for the $1 a door campaigns, the issue advancement funds, and just how to donate to your legislative action committee as well. So it's just important throughout the entire year to be thinking of ways to elevate your fundraising promotions as well. Dawn, do you have anything else to add about our annual timeline?
I would just say, fun fact, we reach out to legislators. We send emails to all the legislators in every state 4 times a year, typically with evergreen type information to kind of lay the foundation for our legislative action committees and just supplement and complement the efforts of the legislative action committee. So those emails go out. We hear back from legislators. We'll connect the legislative action committee with legislators we hear back from. We just sent out the condo safety public policy guide to all legislators and have received several comments, questions, et cetera. As a matter of fact, I just got an email this morning from a legislator from New York. So Ken, I'm going to connect you with her. So those, and we send those emails, right? That means we have those email addresses. So if you're looking for email addresses for your state legislators, we have them. We can help you with them, as well as giving the, connecting you with our system that connects our constituents to legislators. And also when Phoebe's talking about these, the communications, the end of session reports, the during session reports, et cetera, we are happy to help with those communications. If you can give us the structure, we're happy to work on it, send it through our editorial team so that we're conveying a message that is in layperson's terms that will connect with either legislators or connect with our members as well. Steve Randall.
One of the questions that I have is beyond the connection of the Legislative Action Committee with the state legislatures, as we saw, in Maryland, different county executives creating different COVID rules, and then seeing the safety and infrastructure report that was really a great report. I really love it. How do you see, or what recommendations you have as far as a state LAC to reach out to the various county and other jurisdictions as they consider legislation or ordinances that could affect the community associations?
I think that's a great question. And I will say, as an organization, that's a great opportunity for us that we haven't quite mastered. We do a couple of things. We also email the local officials. So especially during COVID, when we knew there were issues like mask mandates and other very local issues going on that impacted associations, short-term rentals, et cetera, we would email we buy that email list as well, and email all of the county and city officials, which is helpful. We also do track legislation at the city and county level, very high level legislation, just basically using keywords. And if something comes up that we think is important for a legislative action committee to address, we bring that to their attention or to a chapter's attention. I would say, because in Maryland, you have Baltimore County as well as Montgomery County that has a really significant population and population of community associations. If you could identify somebody on your team to liaise with that city, that locality, I think that would be a great way to do it, or even a couple of people from that locality, and then report back up to the Legislative Action Committee and report back to the chapter. Some of our chapters have legislative committees that address local jurisdictions. So that's another way to do it, to work with the chapters to see if we can establish a structure for legislative committees for localities.
Yeah, because what we saw that you have property managers that have properties in more than one county, and different county executives had different proclamations. And so there was a lot of confusion in communicating with residents. Just take swimming pools and fitness centers and playgrounds that might be completely different in Montgomery County than they are in Baltimore City or Ocean City. So a property manager with property management company with property managers in multiple jurisdictions were really having to scramble to make sure they had the latest correct legal guidance, and incurring a lot of legal fees trying to use their lawyers to sort it out. So
I think you're right.
Tips we have would be really good.
Yeah, you're right about that. And while we did pull together quite a few resources during COVID on those exact issues, short-term rentals, mask mandates, pool openings, et cetera, county by county, and we had some resources on our website, not everybody knew to look there. And I know it didn't capture everything. There are how many counties? Something like 40,000 counties or something in the US. So if anyone else has suggestions, ideas, we are open to them in how to be more effective at that level. Though we do know the most of our activity is at the state level. It's where most of the legislative activity is, at least. Tom Richards, the copies of the emails that we sent to legislators, yes, we do forward them to the legislative action committees, just so you know that they've gone out. And I know we send a lot of emails, so the fact that you may not recall seeing them doesn't surprise me, because we send a lot, and we try to balance that. But yes, we do send them.
All right, thank you, Dawn. Any other questions at this time? Okay, great. Well, we have everyone's attention. We just wanted to provide a state advocacy activity report from this last year, with 2021 wrapping up in the next few weeks. We had an extremely busy legislative session in 2021. Our 36 legislative action committees were all working. All 50 states were in legislative session, and many of our LACs were still lobbying and advocating on behalf of CAI members in their states virtually as well. Last year, when the pandemic hit, we typically annually put together about a handful of legislative priorities that impact the community association housing model. Last year, we broke down our priorities into two different categories, one being COVID related and pandemic focused, the other being industry focused. I am happy to report we had great legislative success over this last year. Our legislative action committees did an incredible job advocating on behalf of the community association housing model this entire year. We had two top COVID-19 related trends over the last calendar year, one of which was providing limited liability protections from coronavirus claims for community associations. In 2021 alone, 24 states introduced this legislation and 12 states successfully passed it as well with the help of our LACs, which is incredible. The other COVID-19 related trend, which is slowly becoming an industry trend as well, are our virtual meeting capabilities for community association boards and full membership as well. This year, we saw 23 states and Washington, D.C. introduce legislation for these abilities, and 10 states have successfully passed this legislation to date. So congratulations to everyone whose states were successful in these efforts. We're looking at continuing these efforts into next year too. So we have a great deal of resources on both of these topics for you. So please keep that in mind. Our main industry trend this last year and the year before was legislation concerning amendment processes to remove discriminatory restrictive covenants from community association documents. In 2019, CAI published a public policy on this matter, which also has model legislative language in it. It's been incredible how many of our LACs have used this public policy and model legislative language. This year alone, 16 states introduced this type of legislation. 5 states at this point in time have successfully passed it as well. So we're extremely excited to see this type of success at the state level, just with the increase in quantity of legislation our LACs are currently dealing with right now. Dawn, do you have anything else to add for 2021?
I'll just add another congratulations to our states, all of you who led the efforts. You know, when we started looking at virtual meetings and limited liability bills, you guys really jumped right in to work with legislators to move legislation on these topics and on the amending discriminatory covenants. A couple of times a bill would be introduced that was a little bit on the periphery of the topic, and I would be on a call with one of you and your legislative action committees, and you would say, hey, let's go, we're going to contact a legislator right now and see if we can get our language in there. And the fact that we were able to take that leadership opportunity this past session, I think is going to help us in many sessions to come, because we provided solutions during this critical time for virtual meetings, electronic voting, limited liability, discriminatory covenants, et cetera, to be able to provide those solutions and to serve that leadership role instead of doing what we sometimes have to do, which is say, no, we don't want that legislation. We can't pass that. You can't pass that legislation. We were really able to provide solutions, and all of you jumping in to do that was incredible.
Dawn, I am passing it back to you to discuss 2022.
Okay, excellent. Can you go to the next slide? All right, so looking at 2022, as I'm sure you'll probably agree, what you expect to see in your states in 2022 include the following: kind of a residual COVID-related legislation for those states that maybe didn't iron out all the virtual meetings or electronic voting legislation that allows associations the option to do that. You'll probably continue working on those bills. Maybe emergency powers. That's something, again, that was very helpful in Florida and somewhat helpful in California. Emergency powers during a situation, whether it's a pandemic, a hurricane, a disaster, having the board to have emergency powers to operate and not have to follow all of their protocol to convene a meeting if they're unable to convene a meeting. So that emergency powers may be one that comes up as a issue, trend, priority of 2022. Condominium safety, of course. We're already hearing from legislators about this particular issue. What will be happening as we're talking about reserve studies, reserve funding, building inspections. We already talked about this report. You have access to it. If you have any questions, please let us know. But the new public policies are in that report. I think we're going to see a lot of those bills. When Phoebe talks later about our bill tracking, you'll be able to see how we're tracking legislation on these particular topics in different states. So you'll be able to take a look. Of course, we'll continue to see fair housing and discrimination issues that will continue to be raised at the state level. One of the bills that will be helpful, that we can at least help on and have a leadership opportunity, is that amendment process to remove discriminatory covenants. I think we'll continue to see housing affordability issues, probably that single family zoning, those accessory dwelling units type of bills that will be coming about. CAI, the Government Public Affairs Committee is, I think we just passed, right? Our first draft of the accessory dwelling units public policy. And then just overall protecting the community association housing model. And this kind of catch-all, this last one, protecting private contracts, protecting the property rights of homeowners within a community association. You know, this is the catch-all group for those individual constituent or individual issue-based issues: solar, electric vehicle charging stations, signs, political signs, flags, things like that. I think we'll continue to see those issues crop up at the state level. Can you move to the next slide? Oh, there you go. It's you.
Thanks, Dawn. We have touched on a number of resources that CAI offers to our LACs. Many of you know of a few of these. We just want to reiterate the range of resources we have for your use throughout the entire year. We've touched on our public policies throughout this conversation. There's a web page where almost 50 public policies are listed to help you navigate legislation throughout your General Assembly's legislative session. We have a brand new legislative tracking public policy map on our website. I'll do a deep dive on that in a second. We also have a brand new email campaign system too for all of your uses, enhanced with the emails that go out. It also allows for social media posts to go in hand with the email campaigns and supplement the messaging that you're sending in emails via social media as well. We have a number of fundraising documents I will spotlight as well for this group. We also have a great deal of state industry data from the Foundation for Community Association Research on our website that we encourage you to utilize in your testimony and any written materials that go out as well. Lula is putting a link to all of this data in the chat box right now. We also on our webpage have a dedicated landing page for legislators and resources directed towards legislators. We include this link in all of our emails and communications to legislators, but we encourage you to send any state legislator who reaches out to you to this landing page too, just to show them the resources and depth of information that CAI has to offer themselves as well as their staffers in their office too.
And I'll say the resources for legislators often are answers to questions constituents may have, so they don't introduce legislation. We also give them homeowner satisfaction details, information about the legislative action committees. We try to provide as much information as possible so that they can connect with you all and so that they don't introduce legislation before they talk to you. That's our goal.
It's a great point, Dawn. The landing page link is almost our go-to response for a lot of questions we get from legislators. So I encourage you to utilize it in that manner as well. A deep dive on just a few of these resources we've highlighted. Every 3 or 4 years, our office reviews the new legislative tracking and grassroots campaign platforms that are out in the industry. There are several dozen in the nation that we consider every few years to ensure that we have the most up-to-date and innovative resources for our legislative action committees and members to use while they're advocating for community associations in their state. I'm pleased to announce this summer we transitioned into a brand new legislative tracking system, as well as a brand new grassroots campaign system as well. It's much more user-friendly, much more up-to-date than what we've seen previously. There is a link on our website to a legislative tracking map. It's an interactive map. You can look at legislation in your state alone, or you can also look at legislation by issue. So if you're dealing with an electric vehicle charging station bill, you can go to that sub issue, click on it, and see what other states are grappling with this issue as well. So I encourage you to familiarize yourself with this. You can see by these photos, when you click on a bill link, the system does a deep dive into the bill for you, provides you with a number of updates as well that you can use to supplement the General Assembly's webpage too. So bookmark this page. It's an amazing resource for everybody. And if you ever have any questions about how to use it, please reach out to one of our team members. We are here to assist you. There are also instructions on the website too about how to best use this resource. In hand with this new policy map, I'm excited to announce starting next month, we will have new legislative tracking email reports in your inbox every day. You can see on this photo a screenshot of what the email will look like. When you open up the email, there's a link at the very top that takes you to an interactive report. There's a smaller screenshot of this report. It will come up as a PDF. You can navigate this report. It gives you a breakdown of success rates you're currently seeing in your state, how many bills have been introduced, what the topics of the bills are. And it's, again, also interactive. It has links throughout the whole report and will take you right to the bill language. So be on the lookout for these reports starting in December before the 2022 legislative sessions.
And these will go to all legislative action committee members in your state and your chapter executive director.
Right. Thank you, Dawn. So this will replace the old reports you used to receive up until this fall from us as well. The new system's just getting up and running at this point in time. In hand with our public policy map, we have a brand new Take Action email campaign platform, which we're really excited for our LACs to be utilizing in this next year. If you have a bill you want to advocate on, whether asking CAI members to support or oppose the bill, reach out to us. We can help you put together email language. This report is tailored to whoever you want to receive the email campaign. If you just want one committee in the General Assembly to get an email blast because that's where the bill's being heard that week, we can tailor it just to that committee. If it's going to the House floor, we're able to immediately send these same emails to all members of the House to review and consider during this time. This system may look like past ones we've had. The reporting capabilities are extremely more in depth than what we've ever had before, which will help us with follow-up communications. We are able to see how many emails each legislator received and be able to reconnect with legislators who may have responded positively to our email campaigns or voted in the fashion that we requested them to do so. So please keep these email campaigns in mind throughout your legislative session. We're here to get them up and rolling for you and to utilize them to the best of our abilities. Dawn, do you have anything else?
I do have something to add. So our advocacy system, this Take Action system, includes more than just CAI members. So if someone takes action, we actually had an increase in a huge number of advocates in Tennessee, New Jersey, Texas over the past 18 months to 2 years, because we sent a lot of emails, and then our network, like for example, our New Jersey group would send it to others. People would use our system and then they become an advocate. So I don't know if Phoebe, you know the number, but we have 43,000 members, but our advocacy network is well beyond that.
Right. So we have 87,000 email addresses for community association advocates in this email base, which is amazing. Dawn's example of New Jersey, they exponentially increased their advocate base just by taking the links for these campaigns, sending them to their clients, their neighbors, other residents in their communities. South Carolina did the same type of process this year where LAC members were able to blast out this simple link on their LinkedIn's and to their clients, and they increased their advocate base in South Carolina by 4 times this last year, which is just incredible.
And we don't use this advocacy database for marketing our conference. We use it for advocacy efforts. So you don't have to worry that your clients, or if you're sharing it with your client communities, that they're going to be, this list is going to be sold, because we're not selling this list.
A great point, Dawn. And I do want to spotlight in hand with these email campaigns. If you're not a fan of emails, this system also has an app that you can download on your phone. There are instructions here. The application itself is called Voter Voice in the App Store. You can download this app. And when you go into the app, you simply search for CAI, and all of our interactive campaigns are within this application. Instead of getting an email, you'll get a push notification to your phone. So if this is something you prefer, or just want to let other members of your Legislative Action Committee know, please let us know. We can get you these instructions. It's extremely user-friendly as well. Others can download it and become an advocate too. So this is just another option to supplement the email campaign systems.
And just to clarify, this app is for our grassroots advocacy campaigns. It's not for tracking. I thought it was tracking at first, and so it's not. This app is for our advocacy engagement.
And last but not least, we have a number of fundraising resources for our legislative action committees to use as well. A number of our legislative action committees already have our updated $1 a door campaign flyers. We will work with our legislative action committees to curate the verbiage on these flyers to whatever promotions you want to include on these. The back of the flyer has your $1 a door campaign. Many of our LACs have these campaigns. If your LAC does not currently do a $1 a door campaign, it's a fundraiser our legislative action committees do, asking communities to donate $1 per door in their community to their LACs to help support paying for their lobbyists or legislative efforts as well. The front of the flyer gives the top 5 reasons why you should donate to a LAC. These reasons lay out the critical work that our legislative action committees are doing, that they're a voice for the industry, advocacy successes, legislative successes they've previously accomplished, highlighting these high-level reasons why an individual should donate to their legislative action committee. Again, we can work with you to curate these. Dawn, do you have additional information on these fundraising resources?
I will add one tidbit, and that is success for these $1 a door or more campaigns is having management companies and attorneys ask their clients to make these contributions. So an email campaign is much less effective than spreading out the responsibility among members of the Legislative Action Committee and urging them to have conversations with their community clients to make these donations. That's when it works.
We've covered most of our top resources at this point that we do have for our legislative action committees. I'd be remiss to not remind everybody that you can follow us on Twitter. We're tweeting daily, providing updates on what other legislative action committees are working on and accomplishing. Our email address, government@caionline.org. Please do not hesitate to reach out to us with questions. And if you're not already subscribed to our advocacy blog, please sign up today. We send out 1 to 2 blog posts a week with national updates on trends we're seeing, any announcements. A bulk of these updates over the last few months have been Surfside related. Our progress on our condominium safety public policy report, federal agency initiatives we've been seeing. But if you want the most up-to-date news from our office on what we're seeing at the national level, sign up for our blog, because that's where you'll get it firsthand and the quickest too. Dawn, I guess back to you, our exchange on what everyone's seen in their state, questions they have, what's coming up in 2022.
Yes, and I just see a question from Hillary. Yes, we are going to make these slides available to everybody who's on this call. and to those who weren't able to make it. Immediately following this meeting, we're going to send an email with links to the different web links that we provided during the conversation, as well as in the chat room. But also wanted to hear from you what you're hearing in your state of trends, issues that you may be facing in 2022. We'd love to hear from you, or any questions you might have about the content that we talked about today. So just opening it up. Anything? Come on, Ed.
We're, Steve Randall, we're working with Delegate Holmes in Maryland. He's got a task force. Phoebe is helping us monitor that. I've got 5 members of the LAC trying to address the variety of topics that he's brought up as what he intends to do in the session. Obviously reserve funding to go from just 2 counties to go statewide. He's bringing up the issue of managerial licensing, which we are very cautious about. He intends to try to address some of the infrastructure issues, although that may devolve into a county issue on inspection, zoning, and planning rather than a statewide issue. But he's got a lot of ideas because of the Florida collapse, so we're trying to help him do something that's politically doable. Senator Kelly has talked about the fact that residents of community associations are, in her mind, discriminated against because they pay both assessments and county or city taxes. I don't see the Maryland legislature giving up a revenue source, but it's the first time in several years I've heard a legislator bring that up on their own. When she did, I added in the very real issue in Maryland of stormwater management ponds, which are typically excluded or ignored by reserve studies. So, so those are the things that I see happening in Maryland. And we've got a new delegate from Howard County. She's gotten more involved, Jan Teresa. So we're going to ask her to sponsor a bill on dispute resolution, I think, to get her more involved as one of our allies in Annapolis. And even though I live near Annapolis, I still have to say, go Army, beat Navy.
Steve, there may be an interesting model for Senator Kelly to consider in New Jersey. From New Jersey, it's the New Jersey Municipal Services Act, and it does address the issue of associations that are collecting money but not receiving things like snow removal, and creating a situation that I don't know exactly how it works, but there is a remedy so that it makes it more equitable for associations. Maybe Ed, St. George, maybe you know how that Municipal Services Act works.
Yeah, I'll jump in, Dawn, and nice to meet everybody, and thank you for all of your involvement with your LACs. 1996, we passed the Municipal Services Agreement, and what that effectively does is recognize the double taxation that goes on in private community associations with respect to municipal taxes. So a traditional neighborhood gets snow clearing, gets street lighting, gets refuse pickup, fire hydrants, and other services from their municipal taxes. The Municipal Services Agreement creates a mechanism whereby the municipalities have the option to either deliver the service, so deliver snow removal clearing services to roads, not to parking areas or driveways, maintain the streetlights and provide refuse pickup, or reimburse you at their rates. So it varies, by municipality to municipality. I think, unfortunately, New Jersey has 525 municipalities. For such a small state, it's insane. So it's very different, from town to town. But that's effectively what it is. So they either compensate you, and you'd be very proud of your municipalities about how economical they are at snow removal, because they give you about a penny per mile. And I'm spending $10 per mile, and I'm economical. Same with streetlights and refuse, but that's the way it works. So it gives the municipality the option. It's a good deal. We're trying to get fire hydrants extended into that agreement. And then maybe while I have the floor just for 2 more seconds, since you kind of hinted at me, New Jersey has launched proposed legislation with regard to building inspections and safety and reserves. We took the public policy to the T's. We adjusted it, somewhat. We've put one, full package of legislation together. We have a meeting with Senator Troy Singleton from the Housing Committee in New Jersey that we're going to be introducing this to him. He's prepped. We've had a couple of sessions with his staff already. Interestingly, two things just to share and be aware of this. Maybe you know this. There's already competing legislation for us in New Jersey that outgoing Senator Sweeney, if you know that whole story about how he got defeated, the president of the Senate, and Assemblyman Thompson, a very general form of legislation empowering our local building code officials, in effect, in our agency, our Department of Community Affairs, to do what we think ought to be done. They probably won't do what we think ought to be done. So we're also seeing a lot of municipalities in our urban areas that are beginning to adopt ordinances. And from the New Jersey perspective, we want really a statewide legislative process and a piece of legislation that will address all of the municipalities and all the building types.
Thanks so much, Ed. We actually, I was in Florida a couple weeks ago, and several of the legislators leading the conversation on building inspections and structural integrity are likely going to be deferring to the Building Code Commission to come up with recommendations. So it's not going to happen immediately. I think we're going to see that in some other states. Greg, what do you have to share? Thanks for raising your hand. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Dawn. Yeah, I'm Greg Fiorito. I'm here in Michigan, and I'm one of the co-chairpersons, along with Matt Herron, who's also on the call. We're having an issue with the Marketable Record Title Act, and we were just wondering if we could get some input from any of the other states, see how they've handled the issue. The issue is basically they're trying to fix the act, and part of that is including exemptions for community associations. There's a question of whether the Marketable Record Title Act eliminates restrictions that are older than 40 years under the existing statute. So the statute was amended a couple of years ago, 2018, and the effect of those amendments was basically to put in jeopardy community associations, and because they were now covered by the way the statute was changed. Arguably, they were covered by the act, and could possibly, somebody could say their restrictions were eliminated if they're older than 40 years old. So that's the issue in a nutshell. But what we're having a problem with is trying to create exemptions for both HOAs and condos. The proposed bill that is going to be introduced very soon in Michigan does contain an exemption for condos, but the HOA exemption has a cutoff point at 1950. So basically, any subdivision whose documents are older than 1950 would be in jeopardy of just having their restrictions wiped out. And they would have to preserve the restrictions by recording a notice of claim with the Register of Deeds. And we're concerned that our associations won't realize they have to do that in a timely fashion, and they'll lose the restrictions. So we're just curious in our LAC here in Michigan, trying to find out how have other states handled exemptions for condos and HOAs. That's basically the question. I've gotten some input on the forums from Jim Slaughter and Robert Rosenberg, Minnesota and North Carolina. I think there's some suggestions, but any input anybody has would be great. And they can just email it to me, put it in the chat, or bring it up now, but I'd appreciate it.
There's also good language. Well, good. There's language in Florida that could be helpful.
Yeah.
I know Phoebe's familiar with that language. I'm sure she'll share it with you.
Yep.
It's a bit more extensive than you might be looking for. Anybody else? All right. Folks, thanks again for all you do. in leading your legislative action committees. We are here as a resource, here to support. Please keep us in the loop in your email communications, your meetings. Phoebe or I will be participating in as many of your meetings, conferences, et cetera, that you have. And we can also help with a lot that you're doing. We can help with that communication piece, get the word out to members, and share what's happening in other states. Hopefully some research that you may need or share language that may come from another state. So thank you for your leadership and thanks for all of your time. Any other last questions? Phoebe, any other parting comments?
No, just reiterating what you just said, Dawn. Thank you all so much. And please reach out if you have any questions or ideas or want to discuss anything with our office. We are here to support each and every one of you.
Yep. Thanks for all you do. Okay. Keep in touch, everybody. We're going to give you 28 minutes back to your day. So there you go. Bye, everyone.